You step outside on day 3 and the whole neighborhood smells like someone's having a barbecue. Not just one house, every house. The smell of grilling meat and burning charcoal fills the air at 10 in the morning, which would be weird on a normal Tuesday, but this isn't normal Tuesday anymore. The power's been out for 72 hours and everyone just realized their freezers are full of thawing meat that's going to rot if they don't cook it right now. So the whole street smells like a summer cookout. Pleasant, actually. Familiar. The kind of smell that reminds you of better times, of neighborhood parties and backyard gatherings. It doesn't smell like the apocalypse. It smells like Saturday afternoon. Walk past the commercial district and you get hit with fresh bread. The bakery is running its ovens nonstop, baking everything they can while the flour is still good, and they still have fuel for the ovens. They're giving away loaves because there's no refrigeration for tomorrow and bread doesn't keep. The smell is incredible. Fresh baked bread pumping out of the ventilation system, filling entire blocks with that warm, yeasty smell that makes your mouth water even if you're not hungry. The coffee shop 3 doors down is brewing everything in their inventory. Can't save it. Might as well drink it and share it. The smell of fresh coffee mixing with the bread smell creates this almost nostalgic atmosphere, like the world isn't ending, like this is just some weird community festival where everyone decided to cook and bake and brew at the same time. That's week 1. The collapse smells good because everything that's about to rot is being consumed or burned or processed while it's still fresh. People are using up perishables. Restaurants are cooking their entire inventory. Home freezers are being emptied and grilled. It's a city-wide feast happening because everyone knows food won't keep, and there's no point saving it. The smell is cooking and baking and smoking and brewing. It's actually pleasant if you ignore why it's happening. Then week 2 starts, and everything changes. The good smells stop because there's nothing left to cook. Everything that could be consumed was consumed. Everything that could be preserved was preserved. What's left is what's rotting. And the smell of a city rotting is something you can't prepare for until you've experienced it. The turn happens around day 7. The exact timing varies by weather and season, but somewhere around day 7 is when your nose tells you something has fundamentally changed. The cooking smells are gone because there's nothing left to cook. The pleasant wood smoke smell from fireplaces is still there, but it's being overwhelmed by something else. Something sour and heavy that wasn't there before. It starts with the garbage. Normal garbage collection stopped on day 1 or day 2. By day 7, the bags piled on curbs have been sitting in sun or heat for a week. Food waste, organic materials, everything that goes in a trash bag is decomposing. The smell isn't terrible yet, not compared to what's coming, but it's the first indication that the pleasant phase is over. You start smelling it in the morning when the air is still, before the day heats up. A sourness that wasn't there yesterday. Nothing specific. Just an underlying wrongness to the air that your nose picks up before your conscious mind registers what it means. You might think something died nearby. An animal, maybe. You don't realize yet that you're smelling the beginning of systemic decay. Not one dead thing. Everything starting to rot at once. By day 10, the smell is undeniable. It's not background anymore. It's the primary sensory experience of being outside. The garbage piles are producing visible gases in the heat. You can see the bags swelling and splitting. The smell is making people gag when they walk past collection points. This is when people start burning garbage instead of piling it, which creates different smell. Burning plastic and rotting food together. Somehow worse than either alone. What actually creates the sweet smell initially? The sweetness in week 1 isn't just psychological. It's real chemical compounds being released by cooking and baking and processing food at scale that normally doesn't happen simultaneously. When an entire city is cooking their freezer contents at once, the concentration of food cooking smells is far beyond normal. It saturates the air. Maillard reactions from meat being grilled. This creates hundreds of aromatic compounds that humans find pleasant. Roasting, browning, caramelizing. These are smells our brains associate with food and safety and abundance. When it's happening at every house on the block, the concentration is intense. Yeast in baking bread releases compounds like ethanol and various aldehydes that smell sweet and warm. Bakeries amplify this exponentially when they're baking non-stop. The smell carries for blocks, sometimes miles downwind. It's one of the most pleasant smells humans can experience, hardwired into our brains as positive signal from thousands of years of bread being safety and sustenance. Wood smoke from fireplaces and fire pits adds aromatic compounds that many people find pleasant. There's a reason campfire smell is something people associate with comfort. When hundreds of people are burning wood for cooking or heat, the smell becomes ambient. It's everywhere. And in early collapse before the negative smells overwhelm it, wood smoke is still registering as pleasant to most noses. Coffee brewing releases aromatic oils that are distinct and powerful. When coffee shops are brewing out their inventory and people at home are making coffee while they still can, the smell adds to the overall aromatic complexity. It's a familiar, pleasant smell that's normally present, but subtle in a city. When it's concentrated during week one consumption spree, it's noticeable. The combination creates olfactory experience that's actually pleasant despite the context. Your nose is telling you there's abundant food being prepared. Your brain interprets this as positive signal regardless of why it's happening. You're smelling feast, not famine. Smelling abundance, not collapse. The disconnect between what you're smelling and what you know is happening creates surreal experience. When and why the smell turns bad. The turn isn't gradual, it's relatively sudden. One day you're smelling the last of the pleasant smells mixed with early rot. The next day, the rot has overwhelmed everything else. This happens because decomposition has exponential growth phase. Bacterial populations double and double again. The smell compounds geometrically, not linearly. Around day 7 to 10, the garbage reaches critical mass. Every household generated a week's worth of organic waste. Normally, this is distributed across the city in collection systems and processed. Now it's concentrated at curbside and in alleys. The bacterial decomposition that would happen slowly in landfills is happening rapidly in summer heat, in plastic bags, that are creating anaerobic environments. This produces particularly foul-smelling compounds. The smell is hydrogen sulfide, ammonia, various mercaptans, and organic acids. These are the compounds of putrefaction. They're intensely unpleasant to humans because we evolved to find these smells repulsive. They signal disease, death, contamination. Our ancestors who avoided these smells survived. Our ancestors who didn't avoid them got sick and died. We're hardwired to find rot smell disgusting and alarming. But garbage rot is just the beginning. By week 2, the sewage systems are failing in areas without power. Toilets are backing up or being used without flushing. Human waste is accumulating. This creates smell that's distinctly different from garbage rot, more intense, more immediately revolting. The compounds in human waste decomposition are particularly offensive to human noses. Again, evolutionary. We needed to avoid our own waste to prevent disease. Standing water starts to smell by week 2. Storm drains that would normally flow are stagnant. Puddles that would normally evaporate are sitting. Water that isn't moving becomes breeding ground for bacteria and algae. The smell is musty and organic. Not as intense as garbage or sewage, but pervasive. It gets into everything because water is everywhere in a city's infrastructure. Then come the bodies. This is what turns the smell from bad to unbearable. Human bodies start appearing in week 2 or 3, depending on how violent the collapse is. The smell of human decomposition is distinct from any other smell. It's sickly sweet and overwhelming. One body can make an entire building uninhabitable. Multiple bodies in a city create smell that carries for blocks. The sweetness in decomposition comes from cadaverine and putrescin. These are aptly named compounds that smell exactly like death, sweet but rotten, cloying. It sticks to your clothes and hair. It gets in your nose and stays there. Hours after you've left the area, you're still smelling it because the compounds have adhered to you. Animal bodies compound the problem. Dogs, cats, rats, birds, everything that dies in the heat and doesn't get removed. Each species has slightly different decomposition chemistry, but all of them smell terrible. The animal bodies are usually smaller than human bodies, but there are many more of them. The cumulative smell becomes part of the ambient environment. By week 3, the city smells like death constantly, not metaphorically, literally. The chemical compounds of decomposition are in the air at all times. You can't escape it. Going inside helps, but most buildings don't have working ventilation without power. The smell seeps in through windows and doors. It becomes the baseline smell of existence. The psychological impact of the smell. Your nose is directly connected to your limbic system. Smell triggers emotional and memory responses faster and more powerfully than other senses. This is why certain smells can instantly transport you to childhood or trigger strong emotions. The smell of collapse triggers constant low-level disgust and anxiety because your brain is processing death signals continuously. You can't habituate to it completely. People claim you get used to terrible smells, but research shows this isn't quite true. Your conscious awareness might decrease, but your autonomic nervous system continues responding. The smell continues triggering stress responses. Your body knows something is wrong even when your conscious mind is trying to ignore it. The smell affects appetite. The compounds that signal decomposition are the same compounds your brain uses to identify food that's unsafe to eat. When the air smells like rot constantly, your appetite suppresses. People lose weight and collapse partly from food scarcity, but partly from smell-induced appetite suppression. Food that might otherwise be appealing becomes difficult to eat when the ambient smell is death. It affects sleep. You're breathing the smell all night. Your brain is processing threat signals while you're trying to rest. Sleep quality degrades. People report nightmares that incorporate the smells. Your brain is trying to make sense of continuous sensory input that signals danger, and it does this through disturbed sleep and stress dreams. And it marks you. The smell gets into your clothes, your hair, your skin. You carry it with you. Other people can smell it on you. This becomes social marker. People who smell strongly of collapse smells are people who've been in bad areas or who don't have resources to clean themselves and their clothes. The smell creates social stratification based on who can still smell clean and who can't. How the smell changes your behavior. You start breathing differently. Shallow breaths through your mouth instead of deep breaths through your nose. This reduces how much smell you're taking in, but it also reduces oxygen intake. You're semi-hypoxic from trying to avoid smelling the environment. This affects your thinking and your physical capability. You're operating at reduced capacity because you're breathing wrong to avoid the smell. You avoid certain areas entirely based on smell. Streets that smell worse than others. Buildings that are clearly full of bodies. Areas downwind of sewage or garbage accumulation. The smell creates no-go zones that you navigate around. This limits your movement and access. You're taking longer routes to avoid smell even though direct routes would be faster. The smell is controlling your geography. You start associating certain smells with safety or danger. Areas that smell like wood smoke might mean people are living there in an organized way. Areas that smell only of death probably don't have living people. You're using smell as navigation tool, as threat assessment tool. The olfactory information becomes as important as visual information for survival decisions. Face coverings become mandatory not for disease prevention, but for smell blocking. Bandanas, scarves, masks, anything that creates barrier between your nose and the air. They don't work very well. Smell molecules are small enough to penetrate most fabric, but the psychological comfort of having something over your nose and mouth is significant even if the actual filtration is minimal, and you develop smell hierarchy. Certain smells are tolerable. Wood smoke. Even garbage smell becomes acceptable compared to sewage smell. Sewage smell is bad, but body smell is worse. You're constantly evaluating which areas smell least terrible rather than which areas smell good. Good smells don't exist anymore. You're just choosing between degrees of terrible. What creates the different smell zones? Cities develop distinct smell zones based on what's happening in different areas. Residential areas smell different from commercial areas. Wealthy neighborhoods smell different from poor neighborhoods. The smell patterns tell you about the area without seeing it. Residential areas with yards smell like rot and sewage. The garbage is distributed across many small piles at each house. The sewage systems failed and people are using yards as toilet areas. The smell is pervasive but diffuse, not concentrated in one terrible spot but generally bad everywhere. Commercial areas smell like burning and chemicals. Businesses that had inventory are burning it or it's being looted and destroyed. Fuel stations that leaked. Chemical storage that ruptured. The smell is industrial and toxic rather than organic rot. Different category of terrible. Chemical burns in your nose rather than biological disgust in your gut. Wealthy areas smell better longer. They had better infrastructure, backup generators keeping some refrigeration running, resources to manage waste better, access to cleaning supplies. The smell disparity between wealthy and poor areas becomes dramatic by week 3. The wealthy areas smell bad. The poor areas smell apocalyptic. This creates resentment that goes beyond the visual inequality. Near hospitals or medical facilities, the smell is particularly terrible. Concentration of bodies, medical waste, failed refrigeration of biological materials. These areas become completely uninhabitable. The smell is so intense it causes physical reactions, vomiting, dizziness. People avoid these areas entirely. The medical facilities that would normally be safety become hazard zones marked by smell. How you know the smell will never go back. There's a moment when you realize the pleasant smells from week 1 aren't coming back. You're not going to smell fresh bread or coffee or grilling meat again. Those smells required civilization's infrastructure. Without power, without supply chains, without functioning economy, those smells are gone permanently. What you're smelling now is the baseline, and it's only going to get worse. The smell of a functioning city was actually a carefully maintained artificial environment. Garbage removed constantly, sewage processed continuously, bodies handled immediately, food cooked in controlled environments with ventilation. When all of that stops, what you smell is what cities naturally smell like when humans live in them, without infrastructure. And it's terrible. Medieval cities smelled like this. Pre-industrial cities smelled like this. The pleasant-smelling modern city is recent invention dependent on massive infrastructure investment and continuous maintenance. When that infrastructure stops, the smell reverts to historical baseline within weeks. You're smelling what your ancestors smelled when they lived in cities without modern sanitation. The realization that this is permanent changes how you think about the collapse. The other impacts are abstract: food shortage, security threats, medical care collapse. These are conceptual problems. The smell is immediate and constant. It's in your nose every second. It's the sensory confirmation that everything has changed permanently. Your nose knows before your brain fully accepts it. The survivors who manage the smell. Some people figure out smell management, They're not eliminating the smell, but they're reducing their exposure and creating small zones of better air. These people have significant advantage because they're operating at higher cognitive function than people who are constantly breathing rot. They use ventilation creatively, opening windows at night when air is cooler and smell is less intense, closing everything during the day when heat amplifies decomposition smells, creating cross breezes that move air through living spaces instead of letting it stagnate. The smell is still there, but it's moving rather than concentrating. They burn aromatic materials when they have them, wood with pleasant smoke, herbs if available, anything that creates smell that's less terrible than ambient smell. This doesn't eliminate the bad smell, but it provides brief respite. A few minutes where your nose has something else to process besides death and rot. They clean obsessively when they have water and soap. Not to be clean in the aesthetic sense, to remove the smell compounds that adhere to skin and clothes. The person who smells less like collapse has psychological advantage. They're reminded less frequently of the environment. They maintain better mental state because their personal smell environment is managed. They relocate upwind of the worst smell sources, figure out prevailing wind patterns, and move to neighborhoods that are upwind of garbage accumulation, sewage failure, body concentration. The wind carries smell. Being upwind means you're breathing air that hasn't passed through the decay zones. This is a huge advantage that most people don't think about because they don't understand how smell works with weather patterns. What the smell tells you about timeline. The smell progression is actually a reliable indicator of collapse timeline. You can predict what's coming based on what you're smelling. The smell doesn't lie about the state of infrastructure and human presence. Week 1 smells like consumption. This tells you supplies are being used up. People are cooking stored food. Businesses are emptying inventory. This is temporary phase. The consumption smell means you're at beginning. Week 2 smells like garbage and early rot. This tells you waste management has failed, but bodies haven't accumulated yet. The collapse is established, but the dying hasn't started at scale. You're in the dangerous middle phase where infrastructure is gone, but violence hasn't peaked. Week 3 to 4 smells like sewage and bodies. This tells you both infrastructure and population are failing. Multiple systems have collapsed. Death is occurring at scale. This is the worst phase. The smell confirms what you might be denying. The situation is catastrophic. Month 2 and beyond, the smell changes again. The acute rot smell decreases because the organic material has largely decomposed. What remains is longer-lasting decay smell, musty, stale, the smell of abandonment rather than active rot. This tells you you're past the acute phase. The worst of the dying is over. What remains is slow deterioration. Why this matters for survival. The smell is information. It tells you which areas are safe and which are dangerous. Tells you where people are living and where they've died. Tells you what phase of collapse you're in. Survivors use olfactory information as actively as visual information. You're reading the smell to navigate. Fresh cooking smells mean people with resources. Rot smells mean abandoned areas or death. Sewage smells mean infrastructure failure. Chemical smells mean industrial hazards. Each smell tells you something about what to expect before you see it. Your nose is an advanced warning system that processes environmental information faster than your eyes in some circumstances. You're managing your own smell to stay invisible. The person who smells like clean soap stands out. The person who smells like everyone else blends in. You're calibrating your personal smell to match your environment. This is camouflage using scent instead of appearance. Predators use smell to identify prey. You're avoiding being identified as prey by smelling like the environment, and you're using smell to identify threats. The person who smells too clean probably has resources. The person who smells wrong for the environment is outsider. The area that smells different from surrounding areas probably has something happening. Your nose identifies anomalies that your eyes miss. Anomalies are opportunities or threats. Either way, they're important. The sweet week doesn't come back. That's the hardest part. Week 1 smelled good because civilization was consuming itself one last time. People were using up everything that would spoil, creating one last feast before the famine. The smell was the sensory signature of that final consumption. It only happens once. You don't get another week of pleasant smells. There's nothing left to create those smells. No more freezers full of meat. No more bakeries with flour. No more coffee shops with beans. The infrastructure that created abundant food smell is gone. What remains creates only decay smell. The memory of that sweet week makes the current smell worse by contrast. You know what the city could smell like. You remember walking through neighborhoods that smelled like barbecue and fresh bread. Now those same streets smell like death and sewage. The juxtaposition is psychologically devastating. Some people talk about the sweet week like it was last normal moment. Last time things felt okay, even though intellectually, they knew everything had changed. The smell was lying to them, telling them everything was fine. Feast instead of famine. Community instead of collapse. Their noses were giving them pleasant experience while their situation was becoming catastrophic. Then the smell turned and told them the truth. And the truth smells like rot and death and decay. Smells like civilization ending. Smells like everything that kept the bad smells away is gone and never coming back. Your nose knows. Your nose has been telling you from the beginning. Week 1 smelled sweet because it was goodbye. Everything after smells like what comes next. And what comes next is surviving an environment that smells like death because that's what it is. A dying city. A dead civilization. The smell doesn't lie about that. The collapse smells sweet for 1 week. Then it turns. Then it never turns back. That's the progression. That's what your nose tells you about how fast and how completely everything falls apart. 1 week of pleasant smell created by consumption. Then the rest of your life an environment that smells like decay. Your nose knew before you did. The sweet smell was the warning. The turn was the confirmation. And the smell you're breathing now is the reality you're living in. Permanently.